The new season will arrive soon, and with the new release of the Sororitas Class, I wanna bring you a great starter build for her. You can use the Hand Flamer, or Plasma Pistol and Brazier for this setup. Go first for 15 points in Resolve. The Shield Drain will be a great way to get early survivability, and it allows us to have a constant energy shield even when we are using ranged weapons. Next, max out Passion. The benefits for your inoculator are very strong. With the higher capacity, we can have more charges of the expensive Blood Bombs and Cyclones, and make our Cyclones last 75% longer. With the first skill, we can also get constant banner charges. The movement speed is always great, and the Sacred Rite effectiveness gives us a nice boost in faith gain. 20 in Contempt gives a few decent boosts, but overall it's the least important attribute. Burning Piety. We are using Acts of Faith, so we can get a constant 60% damage boost with that, and we also get a lot of faith that way, so you can use the Saint form often. Next, Faith and Fury. With this one we gain even more faith, and if we don't transform, we can get a constant 75% damage boost. Lastly, of course, Blessing of Saint Victorious for the insane survivability it provides, but if you level or grind, you can exchange the first two perks for movement speed ones. For our stats, we want high defenses, a high crit chance, our crit strength over 86, so we can get the 100% stronger dots. We get a bunch of burn dot damage from our items, and we want high cooldown reduction, so we can spam certain weapon skills and Acts of Faith more often. I went with a full basic relic setup, so you can easily replicate it and play it early in seasons or while leveling. I will also show you some better alternatives you can look out for later on. The neural implant is our enrich token source. Get first the passion stat. It will help you to max out your passion attribute, and both shock and slow on vulnerability. So we have a source for both of those debuffs out of the way. The eye implant is also pretty standard, boosting our damage per enrich token. Try to go first here for crit strength and chance, and the supreme crit secondary enchant. The main implant, again damage per enrich token. Here you have a few choices. You can get defensive stats like resists and damage reduction, or you could roll more attributes on here if you want, like this one. Either way, get the AoE damage and the secondary supreme crit enchant again. Socket, AoE damage and vulnerability effectiveness. The thing you want to look out for later on is the main implant of Wrath, since the increased enrich tokens will give you a bigger damage boost than this enchant. I chose this enchant for our purity seal. With this we have a solid way to keep our suppression up, since we are getting shield drain from our resolve attribute. Get here as many defenses as possible and cooldown reduction. For our belt slot we have many choices. There are a lot of good banners, or you could use a refractor field or a Rosarius force field. My first choice is the Banner of Valor. It will give us a huge damage boost for 3 seconds when we deploy it, and grant a damage bonus for every enemy in its area. The great thing here is that we get the first damage boost even if it gets destroyed immediately. Just deploy it every time you meet a boss or elite enemy. It will help a lot to melt them quickly. Our relic enchant will be the Fear Aura. It will help us to spread another debuff, and later on when we get this signum, it will speed up the vulnerability stacks all around our character greatly. You can check out my advanced player guide for more information about it. Get first the vulnerability effectiveness and the burn damage. Socket effectiveness again, and depending on your crit strength, either socket this or another AoE damage one, depending if you need to break the threshold of 86 or not. We are using a Celestian armor. It gives us an Act of Faith slot, which is in my opinion better and more versatile than the two other armor choices. For the relic enchant, I chose this one. The relic armor choices aren't that great, so I recommend you have a look at the list. I think this one could be a decent defensive alternative. For the rest of the enchants, we want to roll defenses again, and for the secondary, more supreme crit. Socket here the Ethereal Doctrine, which will help immensely with surviving high level missions. You can check out my Invincible guide for more information about it. And in the 6th slot, socket Vulnerability Effectiveness. We have a few good choices for our Inoculator Relic enchant. This one is great, so is this one, and this one. In combination with this enchant, enchants like Inoculator Effect Duration, and the attributes like the Potency one, we can get an insane high duration for our red and yellow components. Here we can get more attributes, supply drop charges to refill our belt equipment, and Inoculator Duration, socket, crit strength, and vulnerability effectiveness. As before mentioned, I'm using Blood Balm and Psychons. If you have 3 yellow slots, you can use 3 Psychons. Both of our weapons will have the exact same enchant setup. The damage per debuff enchant is one of the strongest enchants in the game, and another reason why we want to apply as many debuffs as possible. You want to get the minus overheat stat as soon as possible. This will allow us to cast our skills much longer. I chose this Psalm Doctrine to boost our burn dots, since the skills of our weapons are perfect for dot builds. This one leaves fiery patches on the ground, which will continue to burn enemies. This one leaves a persistent burning area on the ground. So does this one from our other weapon. This one also leaves fiery patches on the ground. And if we are hitting burning enemies with this one, we release a small fire nova. In the last slot, socket 1 Ordinatus Psalm for the armor reduction. Our signums will be 2 times the same setup. Try to get first crit chance and strength and burn damage. Later, if you get a general vulnerability one, exchange it for one of them. Our sacred rite will be Burning Devotion. It gives us a free fire aura that will help trigger on-hit effects and spreads heat vulnerabilities. In our acts of faith, we have a bunch of decent choices. Fiery Heart is really nice, since we are dealing a lot of heat damage with persistent AoE effects on the ground, so we can trigger it a lot, dealing 50% heat damage and spreading our burn dots further. With our cooldown reduction, we can also keep this buff up all the time. Which is important for perks and passives like those. In the 2nd slot, you could try Ardent Onslaught for the attack speed and Enraged token gain. Sweep if you wanna pull enemies close to you and you get some nice movement speed. This one will trigger fire novas around you And if you get decent defensive stats, the damage you get from it isn't that bad anymore. Plus, if you don't use it, you get some nice passive healing. For your saintly deeds, I recommend you try them out. I have played this build mostly out of saint form, but the high faith gain we get from our perks can easily support your saint form. Also, if you combine it with this enchant, it gets even better. Skill first in the heat attacks tree for the overheat cooldown speed. This one, so we apply burn with all our attacks, including our fire aura, and this one, so we apply heat vulnerability. Next, put points in your critical hits tree. We need the critical hit chance we get from here, so we can trigger our burns and our heat vulnerabilities, but also to trigger our neural implant enchant. The skill in the middle can increase our damage up to 100%. This one gives us a nice healing boost, and this will increase our suppression damage. Next, put a few points in the movement skill tree for the high cooldown reduction we get from this one. Then max out your AoE tree for even more cooldown reduction, suppression gain, and other damage increases. After that, go into the defense tree for the resistances you get, and the last skill, which is a death protection. In the warfare tree, we want this skill. This will trigger on all attacks from our combo weapons. Here we get some supreme movement speed, here another 30% damage bonus, and we get 30% deflect when surrounded. In our acts of faith tree, we are getting this one. Since we are using 2 acts of faith, it will decrease their cooldowns by 15%. Here we get some energy shield efficiency, and here 3 points to reduce the cooldowns from our acts of faith. In our banner tree, we reduce the cooldown. Here we increase the effectiveness of our red components, more capacity for our inoculator, and with this one we can reset the cooldown of our inoculator. Here even more capacity, and with this one we have a constant suppression regeneration. Down here 2 more points for the inoculator capacity. I put 3 points in the health tree for the suppression damage reduction, and a few points in the damage over time tree. Always keep an eye on your overheat bar, and if necessary, stop attacking and let it cool down for a bit. When engaging with a harder enemy, don't forget to put down your banner for the high damage increase. Try to use your inoculator whenever an energy shield is up because of our inoculator enchant. Also, don't be afraid to go into the ethereal state, since this will replenish our inoculator charges. And with the skill from our attributes, we will get banner charges that way. Now some uninterrupted 118 mission gameplay for both weapons. Look out for more upcoming videos, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
The very existence of this filth defiles the Imperium. They may be great in numbers, but if we sever the head, the body will die. Kill their leaders and break their will. Success is measured in blood. He deserved worse. Much worse. You set a fine example for their kind, Inquisitor. A 100,000 worlds, 100,000 wars. There is no respite. There is nowhere to hide. Across the galaxy, there is only war.